I'll never understand why people operate that way. It doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
Why do people operate from a position of, let's see if there's an opportunity to take full advantage of whatever this is that we didn't have a hand in.
Right.
Well, we didn't create this. We weren't part of it, but there's a great opportunity to take advantage of it. So let's do that.
Yep.
It's always weird.
Well, that's why character is so important. And I think that's a good segue into our episode today. So we've got Adam R. Smith running for Congress District 11, which encompasses Western North Carolina.
16 counties, roughly 4,500 square miles, close to 760,000 people, maybe a little bit more than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so give us a town where it starts if you're heading west in North Carolina.
If you're coming from Charlotte, then, you hit McDowell County, Marion, North Carolina. That's there. It goes a little north to that, to Avery, and then all the way down to Cherokee, Clay, Swain, Macon County, down in the south. So basically the entire Tennessee border.
Okay.
Northern portion right along the Virginia border and south along the South Carolina border. It covers all that. So half of Polk County is part of the district.
Okay.
And then kind of that line, Polk, Henderson, Buncombe, McDowell, Avery, and then west.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Appalachian, North Carolina.
It's what we would define definitively as Appalachia.
Yeah.
100%. This is the home of the Overmountain Men. If you know American Revolutionary history.
Yeah.
The Overmountain Men are the guys that came out of the mountains when the British got too far west. They came out of the mountains and they beat the British. They put them into a rolling retreat. Ultimately, almost a year to the day, mind you, is when they surrendered in Yorktown.
Yeah.
And a lot of that had to do with a series of victories that took place after that major battle at Kings Mountain.
So this is a place that character is truly built because of the nature of the terrain, the conditions, the remoteness.
Yeah, the borderlands during the early colonial periods were made up of rugged individuals who wanted to be away from everybody else. In fact, a lot of the history of Western North Carolina before it became what it became was the people of Appalachia that lived in the boundary territories that were constantly fighting, constantly battling, constantly trying to maintain their space. If they weren't fighting the wilderness, they were fighting Native Americans. If they weren't fighting Native Americans, they might be fighting traders or trappers in the region from outside of the area. So it's got a long storied history of rugged individualism.
Yeah, if you look at old maps, it's kind of that area that was just a little bit blurry and undefined, and there be monsters that way.
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
So are you from this region originally?
No, not originally.
Okay.
I was born and raised in southern Indiana, a little town called Jeffersonville, outside of Louisville, Kentucky. If you take 65 north or south and you're going to go from Kentucky to Indiana or vice versa, you have to go through Jeffersonville to get beyond there. But my family's got interesting history. There's a thing called there's the Colgate plant in town. So you drive past the Colgate plant on 65, and there used to be one of the country's largest clocks that was built there. My great grandfather built the clock. And then, my grandpa Smith, my dad's dad, he was a salvage diver and he's a law enforcement officer in town, but one of the very few sort of treasure hunters in the region, but he helped lay the footings or the footers for the Kennedy Bridge in town, which was, he's part of that team, which is very cool. And then our history can trace all the way back to a group of brothers that came over from, I want to say Scotland, and fought in the Revolutionary War, which is kind of interesting. Yeah.
That part of Indiana is a little bit Appalachian in nature in a way, isn't it?
It's the Ohio Valley. It's not so much. It's super humid in the summertime. And when I was growing up, we would get snow in the wintertime. But the Ohio Valley is, you've got Floyd's Knobs, or the knobs that are just north of that region. And the history that they always told us, or what I learned growing up, was that a lot of those foothills in southern Indiana were generated by glacial shift to the south after the last major ice age, and the Ohio Valley was formed because obviously the Ohio River that runs through that space. Yeah. There's some interesting history there too.
Yeah. That's Larry Bird country, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Indiana Hoosiers. Yeah.
So all-American childhood in southern Indiana, or?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah. We grew up in a Lutheran church, which is Catholic light, And so I was baptized in a Lutheran church. I grew up going to church on a regular basis. I played football in middle school, played soccer growing up competitively, played football in high school, joined the junior OTC program, and then eventually talked my parents into letting me join the military at 17.
Yeah. Did you know all along that you wanted to join?
Yeah. One of the books I drew when I was in elementary school was I was going to be an Air Force pilot and fly F-16s. And then I grew up and got too big. And so, my grandfather on my mom's side was a Marine that fought in World War II. And my grandfather on my dad's side was a Sergeant Airborne at Airborne School during the Korean War. And it was very interesting. Their stories are very different. My pa, my mom's dad, he was on the initial landing at Iwo Jima in Okinawa.
Oh, wow.
But he was a Marine. He was part of the Marine Corps Aviation Division. And there's a really interesting picture that's out there that luckily I've kept. But the very first kamikaze bomb that was found at the Yantan airstrip in, I can't remember if I think it's on Okinawa. But it was his unit that found this bomb. And for those of you who are listening, basically what they would do is they would take a bomb, they'd put it to the bottom of a bomber plane, strap it on the bottom on the outside. A Japanese pilot would then climb into the bomb and would pilot the bomb as a guided bomb into the target.
Wow.
And so they found one intact on this airstrip I think it was in Okinawa. And there's a picture of it out there of my grandpa.
That's a horrible job, driving the bomb.
Yeah, why would you do that? That would be
That's a one-way trip.
I mean, you talk about dedication. That's dedication to what you believe in.
Yeah, they had a lot of conviction in what they were doing for sure.
Well, that was a cultural standard for them.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about the history of Japan and the history of samurai and that mentality of total and utter devout dedication to your way of life and your belief, it would make sense that they would do that.
Yeah.
A little crazy, but it makes sense.
So you had heroes in your family that inspired you.
They were heroes to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were heroes to me. And it was interesting because they served. I had an uncle that was a full-bird colonel in the Army. I had another uncle that was in the Navy. I had another uncle that was a law enforcement officer. I had an uncle that was a postman. The family was diverse in their job sets, but unique in that they were all dedicated to kind of a similar concept, which was the true American dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In service to our nation.
Yeah.
So you did 17 years in the Army?
Almost
Okay.
17 years.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I did almost 17 years. And I've been asked the question a lot, why'd I get out? You're like, dude, that's so close to retirement. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I thought Hillary Clinton was going to win the presidency. And I did not want anything to do
So
with
did
it.
a lot of people.
Yeah. I didn't want anything to do
Especially the
with
news
it.
outlets.
Well, you've seen the video of the gal wearing the pink hat in the street with the glasses going, no,
Right.
She's crying because Trump won. I was doing the same thing, but it was because Hillary Clinton didn't win. And I knew that if Trump won, the leashes would come off and we'd actually be able to do the job we were designed to do. And in fact, one of his very first acts was to drop the Moab in Afghanistan, which was kind of a large signal to the world, which was, hey, the administration has changed. The sort of the new policy that we're going to be running in the administration is different now. And we're not going to just kowtow to political correctness. We're actually going to do what we're set out to do. We're global power. And for the longest time, we didn't act like a global power. For the longest time, we seemed to placate the demands applied to the nation by foreign nation states that didn't have our best interest in mind. And then Trump's first term, one of his first actions was, we're not playing that game. And I know it made a lot of people upset and a lot of people don't like Trump. And I really don't care. I don't care if you like Trump or do like Trump. I don't necessarily care for the way he communicates publicly. I've had a chance to meet him personally, and the way he communicates personally is different. And I got to look at his policies. Like we have to look at the policy being enacted by the people in office and not just constantly have an emotional reaction to how they speak. Because like you want to talk about being easily distracted. It's like we have an entire country of people with ADD that can't concentrate long enough to understand that policy is what matters. Conversation or necessarily how a message is delivered. It doesn't necessarily matter when it comes to geopolitical power or projecting geopolitical power from a nation state.
I've traveled a lot in my life and I've been to a lot of countries. He has a certain machismo about him that actually connects with a lot of people in these other places. And I think a lot of Americans don't understand that because we're in a bubble here.
He does. You're right. Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, look, I was deployed to Central South America. You want to talk about machismo? Go to Central South America, and the way community interacts, the way men interact, very different. Go to Europe, go to Germany, go to Bosnia, go to Kosovo, go to Croatia, go to the Italian Peninsula. Like, go to any one of these nations, and the way the societal interactions are very different. They're very different.
So what did you do in the Army?
So I initially joined the Army as a infantry guy. I did pretty good on my ASVAB and had a pretty good GT score. And when I was talking to the recruiter, he was like, look, dude, you have a large list of options. What do you want to do? And I was like, I want to shoot machine guns. And he goes, cool. I got a job for you. And, I did a lot of research and I kind of understood what I wanted to do. So I had a plan. And the plan was joining the National Guard at 17, go to college, get my degree, go active duty as an officer, and then become a Green Beret. That was the mission. And then 9/11 happened. And when 9/11 happened, I was like, okay, well, we're going to war. Here's an opportunity to do the job. Let's see if we can't get in on this game. And so I dropped my packet multiple times to go active duty, but the unit that I was assigned to, the National Guard, we'd already gotten stop lost. So my first deployment was to Bosnia. And it was—
What year was this?
2002.
Okay.
So it was 2002, 2003 time window.
And you joined?
In 2000.
In 2000.
Yeah. And so this is, not long after getting in, we got deployed to Bosnia. And then we came back from Bosnia. I got deployed to Afghanistan. We came back from Afghanistan. I went to selection, and then I became a Green Beret. And then I had an opportunity to do a whole lot of cool stuff for,
I bet you did.
Kind of the rest of my career. And also, I don't know about you, but I hate people saying, I hate people calling veterans heroes. I have a real issue with that. Yeah. Because the only dudes that I know that are heroes are the dudes that never made it home.
Right.
And the rest of us are just blessed and lucky enough to be here, And it's very awkward for me because I'm like, guys, you can't, please don't ever use that term because that's not what I'm not that guy. I know some guys that were, but it ain't me, And so it's interesting. But, also to the other side of that, I'm very grateful for the taxpayers, the taxpayer money that paid an opportunity for me to be a GI Joe for a little while.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's the old Veterans Day, Memorial Day distinction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, so Afghanistan, Bosnia, Iraq?
No. Well, when I was at the Defense Intelligence Agency, we had orders that covered a large span of territory. And so we had operational responsibilities all over the world, but our principal focus was Afghanistan. So I didn't make it to Iraq. I did spend some time in Central South America and Southeast Asia. So Central South America was counter narcotics operations, counter human trafficking operations. Southeast Asia was a lot of JSETs, but we spent some time in the Philippines and South Korea and stuff like that. That was also counter human traffic, counter narco operations, but principally focused on, I think the time we were there was principally focused on intelligence operations around the movement of the MILF and other Islamic terror interests in the region.
What's it like being a Green Beret?
I don't know. What's it like being a public affairs officer, public affairs NCO?
Yeah. It's cushy.
Yeah.
I'm assuming your job wasn't cushy.
No, not so cushy.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I will say catching a flight, let's say, for example, when I was out in Washington State, catching a flight from Washington on a C-17 over to the Philippines, we had the opportunity to throw our hammocks up between pallets in the bulkhead and, we can go to sleep in our hammocks, which is really nice.
Yeah.
A lot of times we have a little bit more dedicated assets to what we're doing. So, we're not just packing up everything and flying Civ Air or something along. I just caught a flight coming back from out of town for work. And when I was at the airport, there was an entire company of Bubbas there that were catching a civilian air flight, and so they were tracking all their firearms and tracking all their equipment. I was like, oh my gosh, we were lucky.
Yeah.
We were blessed to have the opportunities we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think kids today have a hard time understanding that being in the military, you have a lot of great memories. There's also a very memorable fun side to service that I think gets lost in the, oh my God, that must have been hell.
Well, the suck factor is sometimes the fun factor.
Yeah.
I remember going through selection. There was a running joke in selection. So little little short story for you. We're getting ready to do selection. When I went through was 21 days, and you had different phases in selection. So we were getting ready to do land nav phase, and the rules were during land nav phase, you would get start. You would do. They did it progressively to get more and more challenging, but you'd stay in these Quonset huts, and everybody had gotten butcher blocks, the writing paper. And so guys were going over land nav education with one another inside of the Quonset huts to prep each other for the next phase of training. And so I had just come back from the latrine, and I was walking past these Quonset huts, and everybody had a butcher block but us. And so I went to one of the assessors, and I was like, hey, Sergeant, we don't have a butcher block. Can we get one? And he goes, well, you think you could just walk up to me and ask for a butcher block? And I was like, well, yeah. And he said, well, what makes you think you deserve one? I was like, I don't know if we deserve one or not, but everybody else has a butcher block and we don't. And it would be beneficial for us to be able to put on proper training with proper training aids. And he goes, come with me. So we walk into the head shed, and there's another assessor in there, and I can't remember his name, but he was a really short dude, had eyes of fire though, this guy. We walk in, and the assessor that was with me, he goes, hey, I got a V-dub. Now, a V-dub, for those of you who don't know, is a voluntary withdrawal. And if you voluntarily withdraw from selection, you are never allowed to return, right? So it's a never to return rating, an NTR, if you're a voluntary withdrawal, which means that ultimately you went to selection, you quit, you voluntarily withdrew, you weren't a non-select, you didn't get medical boarded or medical dropped out of the process, you chose to quit, you get what's called an NTR, it goes into your permanent file, you're never allowed to go back to selection again. So we walk in, and he goes, hey, I got a V-dub. And the other assessor looks at me and he goes, oh, yeah, you want to quit? And I was like, nah, I don't want to quit. I mean, I could use a hug. and that was the running joke. And so all the assessors knew that,
right.
that you didn't go by names, you went by roster number. So all the assessors knew that roster number, what was it, I think 172 or 162, roster number 162, every time you see him, just to let you know, like he probably is going to ask you for a hug.
Needed a hug.
Yeah, every time. So that was the running joke when we were going through.
Awesome.
But that was just it. That was I feel like there's a reason why guys who go into the special operations community go into the special operations community. And it's because they want to do something more. They want to be something more. They want to contribute something more. I think that's the majority. There's always the 1% that are just, shitbags.
Yeah.
But I think there's a desire to do and be more. And I think there's also a piece of mentality for a lot of those guys where it's like, you embrace the suck. Like, yeah, we can complain, but we complain while we're getting it done.
Yeah.
Also, if people have said, if you ever hear an infantryman not complaining, there's a problem, right? Like if they're complaining, they're good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get frustrated that the civilian world doesn't work the same way as the military?
Oh my God. I tell you what, one of my biggest frustrations was coming out of the military was that, so you know the name Viktor Frankl?
Yeah.
So Viktor Frankl was a Jewish prisoner during World War II and was in a concentration camp. He's a psychologist. He's wrote multiple books, but one of the books he wrote was Man's Search for Meaning. And he speaks to this idea that the worst experience that you've ever experienced and the worst experience that I've ever experienced has a similar emotional response. So there's a physiological, chemical, and emotional response that happens to that worst experience. So if the worst experience you've ever experienced is a paper cut and the worst experience I've ever experienced is getting my finger cut off, it's the worst experience, right? And so in that worst experience, we can't compare to the experience because then it's who's the biggest victim. But we can connect empathetically because we understand the emotional response, right? That's the conversation that he has. My problem getting out was that I saw civilians complain about everything all the time.
Paper cuts
all the time. And every time the paper cut got a little worse, I saw civilians retract to try and become more comfortable. Let's figure out a way to be more comfortable. Let's figure out a way to not pursue things that might give us paper cuts. And I saw it progressively happen. And now, where we are in the United States, I see emotional reactivity to terms and things like microaggressions, and that's triggered me. These terms that have become almost words in daily usage from, at this point, everybody. It's become a cultural norm at this point. But what are we talking about? We're talking about paper cuts. We're not talking about, look, if the worst thing that you have to worry about in your life, this is the worst thing, is how you're going to pay your next bill, congratulations. Good for you. You're doing a great job. And that's okay. It's okay. Embrace the challenge. Embrace the hardships that come with life, because that's what gains us wisdom. The reason why the old man who's missing a leg, who's got a long, grizzled gray beard like Gandalf sitting on the front porch smoking a pipe, has no care in the world, is because he's lived life to its totality. And that young man that constantly stresses about that paper cut, or constantly stresses about, maybe his vehicle is breaking down, or, he broke his finger, whatever it might be. And the old man just says, yep, I think you'll be all right. Yep. And people say, well, how can you be so calm? How can you be so calm? Well, look, man, when you live life, when you face the most challenging things in the world, it changes your perspective. But if you constantly run in the opposite direction, if you constantly run away from paper cuts, or you're constantly emotionally reactive to paper cuts because you don't gain wisdom, you live your entire life hiding from life, And
it's counterintuitive to the evolution of man. You grow through your adversity. You don't grow through the good times.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What is that? That's the 30-year-old teenager. Somebody that's never had any problems in their life, that's lived the good life, that's been blessed with whatever it is that's good for them. They're constantly winning. You don't learn how to become wise by always winning. You have to fail. That's the reason why I have such a problem with politics and politicians. I really dislike politicians, like to a very high level. And I also dislike the fact that it seems that we as American people have applied this litmus test to politicians to say that if you're not perfect, you can't be of service. Well, holy crap. Like, why do we want people that put on a show of appearing perfect? There was only one perfect person in the history of the world, Jesus Christ. There is no other perfect person. And I don't care how good of a person you are still fallible. So I don't understand why we have to apply this litmus test to individuals who are current politicians or current representatives, that they have to be infallible. We know for a fact they're not. And if they act like they are, they're liars. I would much rather, and I find it interesting. I've been criticized during this campaign by a lot of people that support the endeavor. They really support the campaign. They support what we're doing. They support our message. But I've been criticized about, there's a really awesome video going around right now. And it's like 3.5 minutes of me just dropping F-bombs, right? And it was taken from, I think, maybe 4 years of consulting work that I've done. So it's a bunch of stuff on social media, TikTok, some other places. But the edited version is just me using really strong language. And I find it interesting that they edited this message together, because if you take it out of context, it just sounds like me cussing. But if you listen to the message, it's me having a conversation with CEOs and blue collar business owners. It's me having a conversation with law enforcement and military personnel. And it's me challenging the mentality that mediocrity is acceptable. It's me challenging the mentality that little voice of cowardice in your mind that says, it's okay, go seek comfort, that's not acceptable, right? It's the idea of challenging that being okay with being okay is not how we're supposed to live. And it's even more interesting that somebody would take the time to watch those videos to find those snippets. And what they got out of those videos was strong language.
Is that the worst they found on you?
That's the worst they got on me. I mean, everything else is public information.
Yeah.
I've not hid the fact that when I transitioned out of the military, I tried to kill myself. I've not hid the fact that I've had a struggle, that my ex-wife and I lived next door to one another in Western North Carolina. We're divorced and we have a beautiful, awesome, amazing daughter. And we live next to we literally just moved, like not even a week ago. We moved. That's entirely different story. Property owners wanted to sell the property, and they gave us, some time to get off the property and to that house that they own so they could move the property. We understand. I get it. But, during Hurricane Helene, prior to Hurricane Helene, we lived within 100 yards of one another. And my little girl could walk between the homes without issue, and she could spend time with both of us. And when the storm hit, because we lived within 100 yards with one another, and I was very familiar with the terrain, it was the reason why we were able to land a helicopter there and get them out. So there's been this conversation around, if we want to talk about morals and family values, this guy who cusses. Well, here's a question, and I'll just ask you directly. Would you rather have a guy who cusses but who's direct and will tell you like it is, and you also know will vote for conservative values? Or would you rather have a guy that smiles and shakes your hand and talks real well, and he speaks with charm sometimes, and then he goes and votes for chemical castration for minors? Which one would you pick? I would pick the guy who's going to cuss and be transparent as possible versus the other guy who wants to smile, shake your hand, and then vote to continue to desecrate our children, which I'm not okay with.
And you were probably speaking the language of the groups that you were interacting with at the time, right?
You got to know your target audience.
You got to know your audience.
100%.
And I just have to say, what you're doing for your daughter is fantastic because you're looking out for your daughter in that scenario by providing her with a good upbringing, by being able to see both parents and not creating dissension.
Yeah. I mean, I have a good relationship with her mom, which is good.
That's good.
Yeah. And
I've seen it go the other way, and it's destructive.
It is. It's bad. Yeah. And it's one of my biggest fears, man. I have failed so much in my life, and I am so afraid of failing my daughter, like really, truly afraid of failing my little girl. It's one thing if I fail and it harms or damages me. It's another thing if I fail and it potentially harms or damages my daughter. Mm-hmm. And I've been told by every dad the same thing. Adam, you're going to fail. It's okay. Just always show up. Just always show up. So that's the best that I can do, right? That's right. The only thing. That's the only thing I can do. Yeah.
So you got out in 2017?
2016.
2016.
Late 2016.
And then you went into consulting of some sort?
So when I get out of the military, there's a statistic. They say that it was at 21 or 22 veterans commit suicide a day. Yeah. And what I learned, hindsight, is what I speak about at veteran nonprofits when I go and speak at veteran nonprofits. And that is, when you're in the military, you have an identity, you have a purpose, and you have a mission. And your identity 9 times out of 10 is like, what's your MOS? What's your job? So when I was Green Beret. That was my identity. And my purpose was to always be better at my job, right? To be a service, defend the Constitution, but to always be better at my job. And my mission was whatever came down from higher command authority. So if we're in a combat zone and your mission comes down and you're supposed to kill or capture so-and-so who's a high value target HVT in whatever location by this time or that date, right? That's your mission. When you come back from overseas and you're back in the United States, your mission may become like, well, you're going to develop a new communications package. You're going to go do training or whatever that specific piece is. And when you get out, you lose all of those things. So you lose your identity. You lose the community that identifies, or you lose a community that spends time in a common mutual desired outcome, right? Then you lose your purpose because your purpose was driven to your identity. And then you have no mission. So you go from an ability to find significance in the actions that you take for something greater than yourself. And then you come out of the military and you lose all those things. And this is where I have a major problem with the conversation around identity, because there was a time when the competition of ideas and the merit of the message was the priority. But now you can't challenge an idea because people have allowed those ideas to become their identity. So if you challenge an idea, you're not challenging a thought. You're not challenging a process. You're now challenging the person's definition of self, which is why we see so much emotional reactivity that comes from it. So in coming out of the military and finding myself at one of the lowest points of my life, there was a day when, I drank every drop of alcohol in the house, wrote my suicide note, put a pistol in my mouth. And by the grace of God, because obviously he had more for me to do, I came to as my then fiance, who is the mother of my daughter, walks through the back door of the house, and there's booze bottles and my pistol is on the floor because I passed out and the pistol fell out of my hand. And I grabbed my suicide note off the coffee table so she couldn't see it. And she was angry. She got angry. She's like, "What are you doing? You've been drinking all day? You're playing with your guns? Is this what we're doing?" I'm like, "It's a Wednesday. What are you doing on Wednesday? You drink and play with your guns, right?" And the next day I got a phone call from a very good friend of mine who's a former Navy SEAL. And he said, what do you back? I heard you're back in town. I know that you called. He's like, getting a beer would be great, but like, what are you doing? You looking for work? I could use some help. And I was like, what do you got going on? Well, at this point, I couldn't find work, right? We had in the process of transitioning out of the military, I couldn't find a full-time job, especially with where we were living. I was really considering going back to school to try and get my law degree, but going through the numbers and at the math, I mean, at that point, I was in my mid 30s. Early 30, like 33, 34, somewhere in that window. I can't remember the exact, go back and look at the dates and figure it out. But, doing the math, like, okay, well, I could go back to school and finish my bachelor's degree, which I didn't finish. I have a heap of college credit hours. I just didn't finish my degree. But then I have to go to law school and finish a law degree. And then I'd have to become a practicing member. By the time I'm doing that, I'm mid 40s. And if we want to have a family, we're not making any money. That just doesn't fit. So we changed the plan. Couldn't find work. And he called me on that Thursday. So this is the next day after everything had happened. And I feel like crap. I'm hungover. I'm embarrassed. I feel full of shame and horrible amounts of guilt, just riddled with all of it. And I still wasn't certain that I wanted to be around. And he called me and he goes, well, dude, what are you doing next week? I'm like, what do you got? He's like, well, I got to go to Northern Ohio, train a bunch of bubbas. You want to come with me? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm in. Let's do it. He's like, cool. So the plan was we're going to go to Northern Ohio, train a bunch of law enforcement officers and updated TTPs and try and get these guys to slow down, trying to get these guys stop the chasing bangs into a room and change how they apply tactics. So we went up for 5 days. We trained a heap of people. We got done. We drove back to Louisville, Kentucky, which is where the office space was. At that time, my fiance and I were living out of Eastern Kentucky, just outside of Lexington, a little town called Lancaster. And we got back and we sat down and he said, here's a check for what we agreed upon. And he said, put this in your bank account, make sure your bills are covered. And he goes, here's some cash. He said, I know what you're going through. I can see it all over your face. I understand exactly where you are. Take this cash, go buy yourself some blue jeans and some pants, whatever you got to do. Take mom out for steak dinner this weekend. This is my investment into you. I want you to be a part of what we're doing. If you're in, I'll see you here Monday morning. If you're not in, that's okay. You earned this, and I'm grateful for you. And I got on the truck, and I started driving back to the house, and I called my fiance at the time, and I said, I'm on the way home. This is what just happened. I got to tell this story to you. And she said, well, that's real nice of him. She still didn't know what had happened the week previous.
She never found the note.
She never knew. She didn't know until I did an interview and we were talking about suicide. And I told my story and that's how she found out.
Wow.
That was years later. But, that guy, former Navy SEAL, he understood the idea that where we come from, we don't want handouts. We want to be a service. We want a purpose.
He was heaven sent.
100%. By God, definitively, without question. And that's what I did. So over the next few years, I became the director of training for his company, and we trained a whole heap of law enforcement officers all over the United States. We built a really great reputation for the tactics that we delivered and how we engaged with law enforcement officers and how we engaged with training principles and methodologies. And it was great. And that's when I realized that identity, purpose, and mission is not about the hat that you wear or the job title that you have. You may get to carry the title of dad, but that's not your identity. You may get to carry the title of Green Beret, but that's not your identity. And I realized that going through all of those things that really the content of our character, our core values, our moral foundation, that's our identity. And our purpose, well, God put us here for a reason. And what I recognized for me was that, my purpose was to create impact. And it had been that way since I was a little kid. I saw somebody in trouble or a dog that was hurt. I tried to help. I see somebody on the side of the road. I pull over and try to help. And there's a way to create impact in the world. And then your mission, what I figured out was your mission is whatever you can do to deliver your purpose into the world. And I was speaking at a nonprofit one day and I said, I understand now that my identity is me. My name is Adam Smith. That encompasses all aspects of who I am. My purpose is to create impact in the world, and my mission is however I choose to deliver that purpose into the world. And in this moment right now, you are my mission. And that's kind of changed the trajectory of my life in a lot of ways. Yeah.
You were called to service again after Hurricane Helene hit. You were instrumental in doing a lot of the good work to help folks. Right
time, right place, right people, blessings of God. It wasn't me. If it had been me, it wouldn't have never happened. That story in of itself is insane. We were in Texas when it went down. My fiance and I were in Texas before she was my fiance. Since after my wife and I are divorced, we lived next door to one another on Highway 9 and storm hit. We lost communications Thursday night. And Friday morning, we still didn't have any comms. Nobody had comms. Couldn't get in touch with anybody. And, I looked at my girlfriend at the time, now my fiance, and I was like, we got to get back. We just got to get back. We're supposed to speak at a veterans nonprofit that day. Veterans nonprofit, Texas Valor Project, Coast to Coast, Defenders of Freedom. They do such a phenomenal job in supporting veterans and first responders to get treated for post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury. And I went through one of their programs, went through the TBI program. holy crap, life-changing. In fact, I went through it the December before the storm. So I went through December 2023 for traumatic brain injury treatment. September 2024, Hurricane Helene hits. And when I say life-changing, I mean life-changing. When I walked into treatment, they said I was basically a walking stroke waiting to happen. My body wasn't processing red blood cells. It wasn't out processing iron. I had a hard time walking. I would lose my breath. I would stand up out of a chair and lose my breath. Like it was my health was really bad. And going through TBI treatment, it changed everything. My health is 1,000 times better than what it was, which is amazing. And the big piece was like I get to play with my little girl. You know, we had snowpocalypse that just came through. And if it had been December of 23, I would have not been able to play with her because I wouldn't have been able to walk up the hill. Right. And now we're hauling sleds and tubes up the hill, and we're sledding and tubing down the hill and building snowmen and snowball fights and having a great time. 2023 in December, I couldn't have done that. There's just no way. But it's that Friday we left Friday morning from Austin, Texas, driving through Dallas to get back to the house in North Carolina, and we still couldn't get any comms. We were able to finally make communication with my former brother-in-law like noonish, but he couldn't get out to anybody. He couldn't get to his mother, his mom and dad-in-law that live in Waynesville, and couldn't get out to Megan and Toby that live out on Highway 9. And then comms broke again. And then Friday evening at about 5, I got a phone call from a good buddy of mine, Jamie White. He was at the time a firefighter at Girton Fire Station. And he climbed to the top of Bearwell Mountain and got signal and called me, and he said, "Hey, where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm on the road. I'm racing back." I said, "Where's Megan and Toby?" He said, "You tell me." I said, "Well, they're on Highway 9 just downriver from Broad River Fire Station." And he goes, "Adam, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Broad River Fire Station washed out, and it's really, really bad, dude. You got to get back." He goes, "I'm so sorry. If I'd have known, I'd have gone. I'd have gone. I'm so sorry. I'd have gone." And then his phone cut out. And I'm like, oh my, it's that bad. Like, it's that bad. This is a guy who's not going to respond that way, right? So it's that bad. No comms. And now a good friend of mine who I trust implicitly with my life and the life of my family is telling me it's that bad. Like, holy crap. From probably 6 o'clock at night until about midnight, I was almost inconsolable. And I could not shake this overwhelming, gut-wrenching feeling that they were dead. And at 1 o'clock in the morning, we're in Greenville, and we're in South Carolina, and we're getting ready to come through kind of the dead zone. And I kind of had a kind of rough idea of maybe where it would be. And I looked at Taylor, my girlfriend, she's now my fiance. And I said, "Taylor," I said, "Look, if you want to fly out, I'm going to drop you off at the Greenville airport, and then I'm going to go get business, because I don't really know if you want to be around for this. It's going to be pretty gnarly. But if you're in it, you just tell me." And she was like, "I'm in it. Let's go." I said, "Roger that." So we just kept hammering down. We came across the border. We found the one spot. We found the line, right? 3 feet one way, no cell service. 3 feet the other way, cell service. We found the line. We knew exactly where it was. Friday, we'd put out a message on social media to try and find somebody who owned a helicopter. And by the grace of God, we were put in communications with him about 9:30 that night, Friday night. And he lived in Burlington. Another phenomenal human being. Like, so many amazing people that showed up for this. So we drove in. We tried to get through the trees that were down on the road coming in. There was trees down that we had to either dodge or cut through, which was completely insane. And that's on the main highway, right? Hadn't even been touched yet. And then we got into Southern Asheville coming out of South Carolina. We're trying to get on 40. And when you get off of 26, trying to get on 40, the French Broad River was still so high that it was flooded over 40 still. So we had to go around about 240. So we're like, all right, well, we'll take 240. We'll get over to Fairview. So we were able to make it to Fairview Fire Station. And we tried to go up Morgan Hill Road or Garin Creek Road, and had to cut our way through, but we couldn't get through because the road was completely washed out. So then we turned around and we backtracked and we went north, and we tried to come south on Highway 9, and we couldn't get through because, and I have pictures of it, which is completely insane. There's a landslide that happened, a mudslide that happened, and it's probably 25 feet high, and it was at least 50 yards long. I mean, it was insane. Yeah. And it was 3 tiers of switchbacks on Highway 9 that had come down to this one spot, just barely missing the house at the bottom of the hill, just barely missing it. And I was like, well, crap, we can't get in. So we tried to cut our way in, couldn't do it. We tried to cut our way in a bunch of different ways. We then got on 40 to try and go through Old Fort, but we couldn't get through the pass because the pass had been blocked off with a mudslide. So like, basically, my little girl and her mom are on an island, completely inaccessible from the outside world. with no communication, no power, and I have no idea if they're alive. And like just before we're driving in, about 1 o'clock, when I told Taylor, hey, I can drop you off the airport. And I looked at her and I was like, we're just going to assume they're dead so we can get to work. Like, we're going to be done worrying about them. We're not going to care about their safety. We don't care if they're alive or dead. We're just going to focus and accept that the worst has already happened, because if the worst has already happened, we can focus on getting the job done, right? Like, let's just get this job done. And it was that old version that showed up. You know, when you compartmentalize all your emotions, you turn it all off and you just get to work. We met a helicopter at 9:30 in the morning at the Harley-Davidson in Swannanoa. Great human being. Black Bell Jet Ranger 505. And he landed in the not the parking lot, but the field behind the Harley-Davidson. Aaron. And got in, and Aaron was like, dude, I'm sorry, I didn't realize how bad it was. I had no idea. He lives in Burlington. He had no idea. Charlotte had no idea. Nobody knew.
No idea.
Nobody knew. And we flew in, and as we flew in, we were assessing damage en route. And, you know, basically 50% of Highway 9 had been washed away completely or covered up with landslides. There was no way vehically to get back there.
Highway 9 goes between Old Fort and...
So Highway 9 is between Black Mountain and Batcave.
Okay.
And then it keeps going further south past Batcave.
Okay.
And where we lived was directly between Black Mountain and Batcave, almost exactly midway on Highway 9. And we flew in and we circled over the HLZ to confirm landing site was okay. And as we're doing it, I'm doing a ground survey to try and identify potential damage, and their house was still standing. And I was like, oh, what? And then the next door neighbors came out, and they were looking at the sky and saw this helicopter circling overhead, and the helicopter landed. And I was getting out of the bird, and here they came walking around this hedgerow of trees, man. Just perfect. Wow. My little girl thought it was an adventure, you know? Daddy, we cooked over the fire and we had candles. We watched an ambulance float down the river. And they did watch an ambulance float down the river.
Good grief.
Yeah.
How old was she at the time?
So this is, what year is this? This is
2026.
26. So she'll be 5. So she was almost 4. So she's like 3 3/4 years old. And yeah, it was crazy.
Experience.
Yeah. We took them back. We dropped them off at her sister's house in Asheville, and we drove back to Greenville to get more supplies. And then we went back to the Harley-Davidson, and we were able to secure a Starlink from a guy who came to town. So we bought one, we activated it. That gave us comms to the outside world. That was Saturday. Sunday, we had our first pallet of water, first trailer full of water show up, and a guy with a skid steer that cleared all the mud out of the parking lot and opened it up for operations. Sunday night, we had a group of volunteers that were veterans that came into town, and they just stopped by, and we had a conversation, and they're like, how do we help? Like, that's a great question. I have an idea. This is, I think, how we can do this. Monday, we had our first tractor trailer show up. So by Monday into Tuesday, we had, I mean, by day 4 or 5, we had brought in like something like, I don't know, 650,000, 1 million pounds of supplies. You know, by day 10, we had moved 2 million pounds of supplies. By the time we were done, we had moved probably 6 or 7. I think our estimate's about 6 million pounds of supplies. 25 over a 45-day period, 6 million pounds of supplies is what our best estimate is. 2,500 air sorties that we coordinated directly, an average of about like 52 a day. The FAA cut what's called a NOTAM. It's a notice to airmen that made the HLZ, our hasty HLZ, turn it into an actual airfield that we had air control over. So for people listening, you are breaking federal law if you're trying to deconflict air traffic. It's breaking federal law if you're not an air traffic controller and you don't have authorization by the FAA. We had so much air traffic coming through our HLZ, like to the tune of like over 125, 130 unique tail numbers landing every day for over a 14, 15-day period. Wow. The FAA cut what's called a notice to airmen, which is basically it's an official document from the FAA to advise all personnel that are pilots that will be operating in a specific region of either, let's say, you know, a temporary restricted flight area or temporary flight restriction TFR, or, you know, for example, a hasty airfield that is now an official airfield, and they made it official. And we had air traffic controllers on. We had tactical air traffic controllers that were on the ground. We had almost 3,000 or just over 3,000 volunteers come through. And in the first sort of 14 days, a majority of the personnel that were on the ground were special operators, either retired or on permissive leave. And they made up a majority of the operational staff, which was insane.
Are they heroes?
Oh, without a question.
Yeah.
Without a question. You want to talk about blessings and amazing miracles? There's a story that took place that I'll never forget. And we had a helicopter getting ready to spin up. They're going to do a medical evacuation of a lady having a diabetic response because she had run out of insulin. It had been 4 days and she had insulin. It wasn't good. And so we had PJs, pararescue guys. We had PJs. We had rescue divers. We had doctors. We had emergency medical doctors, ER doctors. I mean, we had them all. Like we had 18 Deltas from U.S. Army Green Beret, 18 Deltas that were on station that were there on permissive leave. It was insane. The amount of skill sets, like true and legitimate subject matter experts in their field that we had on the ground, I've never seen anything like it. And so, this helicopter spinning up, we didn't have any insulin. We couldn't find any insulin. And it kind of became this thing where it was a standard. If you said it out loud, it would either show up in the moment or had just shown up and we hadn't seen it, or would show up in 15 minutes. That became the standard. And so you could hear this murmur about the operations center. And everybody was like, "Do we need insulin? We need insulin. We need insulin." And this bird's getting ready to take off and Pork Chop's working the front gate. This car pulls up and Pork Chop, that's his nickname. Pork Chop runs up to the van. That's a great name. And he looks like a pork chop too. Like this dude is awesome. He's just stout, thick, big old thick neck, like all muscle, you know. He's working the front gate and this van shows up and he's like, "Hey, we're not taking small independent donations. Our principal focus was to bring in as much bulk goods as possible so that we could palletize them or sling load them or load them in helicopters and then get them out to distribution locations throughout the region." That was the principal focus, that and medical evacuations. And so Pork Chop was like, "Screw it. What do you got?" He's like, "Well, what do you need?" He's like, "We need insulin." He's like, "Oh." And he reaches in his back seat and he pulls out a giant satchel of insulin, like a big cooler of insulin and a big cooler of, and a bag of glucometers and Lancets, right? And Pork Chop's like, "Holy crap." And he gets on the radio and he calls and he's yelling, "Hold the bird, hold the bird, hold the bird." And he sprints probably 300 plus yards from the very front entry point of the Harley Davidson all the way out to the HLZ where the bird's getting ready to take off. And in route, he's like, I got insulin. And we already had the bird loaded up with medical personnel because they're going to have to go do this medical evacuation. So it's even better. So loaded up the bird. He got it out to him. That bird took off and that bird went out to do the medical evacuation. I think the medics assessed her and the doctor assessed her to make certain that she was okay, provided her insulin, got her blood sugar back into a controllable standard on site. And then the rest of the day, all they did was deliver insulin. Within 24 hours, we had insulin coming out of 2 full-size refrigerators. We had it packed top to bottom, wall to wall, front to back of insulin within 24 hours of that. That's the miracles that took place.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And you know who it wasn't? It wasn't when we landed to get my daughter and her mom out. It wasn't the federal government. It wasn't a state government. It wasn't a congressman. It was neighbors. It was community members. It was good old boys in the back country that woke up that morning where they're like, "Well, go grab a Budweiser. We got some work to do." And they busted out their backhoes and their chainsaws and their tractors and they started getting to work, digging each other out and clearing roads.
Hold my beer.
100%. And that's what they did. It was them that did it. I take personal issue when politicians attempt to take credit for things they, one, didn't do, and two, eliminate credit or try and steal credit away from people that actually did something. And I'm not saying me. I'm talking about the guys down the street. I'm talking about my neighbors that brought a community together. I'm talking about the people in Spruce Pine that built an entire operations center out of a fire department, and they did it as a volunteer. I'm talking about the guy who lost his business, lost his home, pulled people out of the river, and then came to volunteer at our location because he had nowhere else to go. And the only thing he knew to do was to help and be of service. Those are the people I'm talking about. And I take a lot of personal issue when you see politicians that attempt to try and take credit for that stuff.
Are they doing that?
Oh my God, all the time, especially the incumbent, especially Chuck. I have a lot of problem with that. It really bothers me a lot.
Is this what gave you the motivation to run for Congress?
If you watch the failure of the federal, look, man, you were in the military and you know the shenanigans of the bureaucratic process in the military, right? Well, let's multiply that by 1,000. Let's multiply the shenanigans that we witnessed in the military by 10x. And that's what it comes down to. You have got the largest employer in the country, which is the bureaucracy of the federal government. You have more red tape in the way of actually being effective. And while Western North Carolinians were sleeping in the cold in tents on the ground, they sent billions of dollars to Ukraine rather than sending those billions of dollars to active recovery of Western North Carolina. Not only that, let's go one step further and let's talk about the fact that the incumbent is cheering the fact that he's on the Appropriations Committee and he's been directly responsible for voting over $6 billion in appropriations to come to Western North Carolina. Well, where in the F is it? Where is it? Only 20% of it has been used. 20%. And how long did it take to appropriate those dollars? Over 90 days. And in those over 90 days for the first series of appropriations to happen after the election happened in November of 24. Over 90 days for that to take place. That wasn't an administrative issue on the Trump administration. That was a legislative issue. Go one step further. Why is it that during October, when the vote happened to send money to Ukraine, there was not animosity, loud language, like whatever you want to call it? Why didn't we have outspoken leaders that were standing up and saying, why are we sending billions to Ukraine? We literally just had one of the largest floods in the history of the region ever happen. We have $60+ billion in estimated damage, and you've appropriated $6 billion, and we sent $60 billion to Ukraine. I'm lost by this. I'm lost by this. And why aren't we having a bigger conversation about Ukraine? Why aren't we talking about the fact that we can send billions of dollars to Ukraine? The European Union and NATO can send billions of dollars to Ukraine. But who's the number one energy producer and provider for the EU? Russia. So we have the European Union and European nations and NATO all yelling at the United States to say, how dare you challenge this? How dare you have a conversation with, how dare you do that? How dare you do this? Guys, you're literally funding the war from both sides. How is that in Ukraine's best interest? More importantly, how is that in the world's best interest? It makes no sense to me. And so we've got, I get very frustrated about this. I swore an oath to the Constitution. That oath didn't end when I got out. That oath still stands to this day. And what I see now more than ever before is a whole bunch of freaking self-serving bubbas in positions of influence. They'd rather be there in order for them to have a title and significance rather than actually being a true representative of the people. It just doesn't make sense to me.
What will you do differently?
Show up. Let's just start there. Can we just start from one place? At this point, Chuck doesn't even hold town halls anymore. He holds audio town halls or call-in town halls where he has phone screeners have the ability to screen who the caller is going to be and then permit that caller to either be in the engaged conversation or not be in an engaged conversation. He doesn't answer questions direct. He refutes politicians in general, but he's no different. Politicians don't answer questions direct, and neither does he. And it's very frustrating for me. But let's just give an example. About 4 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, he voted to continue to fund something called the National Endowment for Democracy. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not.
The National Endowment for Democracy basically ran in lockstep with USAID. It was formed in the 1970s under Reagan after a major CIA scandal. And it was formed in order to foment soft power revolutions around the world. And it was done so that the United States could have its hands off of it, just like they do in a lot of things when they operate through surrogates, but to move money from the federal budget into a private NGO that could then foment soft power revolutions, like color revolutions around the world. We know, because we have the evidence behind it, that the National Endowment Democracy has shifted its focus, a lot of its operations from overseas to the United States. So now where is those funds going? Well, there's barely any oversight of the organization. And and our incumbent, Chuck, decided to vote I think with either 25 or 40 other Republicans in lockstep with the Democrats to continue to fund it to the tune of $315 to $320 million. Why? Why are we doing that? That's not conservative values. That's not conservative values. And then when you ask them a question about it, or any politician, they don't answer it directly. They sidestep it so they can give themselves an out. Well, what's your position on this? Well, why did you vote for this? Because I'm on the Appropriations Committee and I know. That was his answer. Well, I'm on the Appropriations Committee and I know. How is that? Help me understand how you can justify the vote on this. And maybe I'll change my mind. At least give me an opportunity to understand the thought process behind it. But we have gotten to a point in American politics where we're no longer dealing with people that are true representatives of the American people for the most part. Now, I will say there are some in office that I highly respect. Tim Burchett. I think Tim's doing a heck of a job. Tennessee. I think Tim's doing a heck of a job. I think Tim shows up and handles business. I think Kennedy, Louisiana, again, doing a heck of a job. I think that the fact that they're willing to go on record, they're willing to stand against, like they're asking questions of why this illogical actions are happening. I think that's I think Tom Massey's doing the same thing. I think Massey's doing something similar too as well. And a lot of people will say, well, Massey's anti-Trump, and I don't think Massey's anti-Trump. I think Massey is for conservative values. I think Tim Burchett is for conservative values.
Well, people have to remember Trump isn't a true Republican either.
No, I don't think he's ever been a true Republican. I think Trump believes in the country, and I think his policies that have been driven forward are good policies for the country. I think the actions that he's taken when it comes to geopolitical trade agreements and in general sort of forcing a simmer down on a lot of interregional conflicts, which is because people don't know what he's going to do. That's very beneficial. I support Trump in a lot of his policies, probably most of them that are out there. And also, I don't think he's a true Republican.
Do you think the party's going to stay together, or do you think it's going to fragment?
Oh, it'll fragment. It takes somebody with such a gregarious, driving personality like Trump to bring that faction, so that all the different factions that rest within the party together. The Republican Party is very different than the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party, it is the party. It operates very much like a communist dictatorship, the Democrat Party, right? If you're in charge, you toe the line. If you don't toe the line, you're out. I mean, look at what they're doing to Fetterman. You know what I mean? Look at what they're doing to Kennedy in Health and Human Services. They're coming after him tenfold, and they're like, well, he's crazy, and you guys loved him 6 years ago, 5 years ago. Now all of a sudden you hate him. I mean, that makes perfect sense when you think about what political talking points you're going after. But the Republican Party is different, because the Republican Party is made up of individuals who, some of them truly believe in true conservative values. Some of them truly are Christian constitutional conservatives, and some of them are rhinos. And rhinos operate outside of the standard of what we would consider true Christian constitutional conservative values. And that's where I fall. That's where I'm at. I think that the Constitution and the Founding Fathers' intent, we've moved away from it. We need to move back towards it. I think that we have lost our way when it comes to education. I think we've lost our way when it comes to civic mindedness. And I think there's such a diametrically opposed viewpoint in the United States between individuals who want to see the destruction of the Constitution and the country in order to rebuild something that is more in alignment with Marxism or socialism or communism, and individuals who believe in a totalitarian state, and individuals who want to return back to a constitutional standard of conservative principles. And notice how I didn't say Democrat, Independent, or Republican, because those titles really don't mean much when it comes to the ideological divide in the country. You know what I mean? We can have generalizations of those titles. In general, we have the Democrats. In general, we have the Republicans. In general, we have the independents. But the ideological divide in the country, there are a lot of people that are Democrats that they don't believe in anything that the radical left believes in, but they support it because it keeps them in power. That's where the totalitarian, uniparty, centralized power concentration takes place, right? How much more power can we take?
So you have a disdain for politicians, but you're running for Congress.
Not as a politician.
But not as a politician.
Yeah, statesman. I think there's a dramatic difference between a politician and a statesman. Our founding fathers were statesmen. They challenged ideas. They challenged the thought process. But they had a similar desired outcome, which was self-governance free from tyranny. And every warning that was given to us by the founding fathers, we're looking at real time. George Washington warned about internal political factions within the country. James Adams said that the Constitution is for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the governance of any other. George Washington talked about a foundation, the common foundational principles and moral foundation of the country based on Christian values. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson in their conversation. People don't even realize, but Thomas Jefferson's first draft of the Declaration of Independence and his last grievance in the Declaration of Independence, it was a stance against slavery. He was a slaver. And yet he was in his very first draft, he wrote to the opposition of slavery. People don't even know that because the history's not taught anymore. So I think statesmen are individuals who believe in selfless service to something greater than themselves, to God, country, and community. And they are, I would say, leaders of civic-minded individuals who want to be engaged in self-governance. And they do it for a short period of time, and then they go home. And that's what they do.
I've seen your signs on the corners. They're smaller than your opponents.
Well, yeah.
And I've also seen your financial figures that are publicly available. You've got your work cut out for you.
It's been a major uphill battle. Most people don't know this, but every sitting member of Congress and every sitting member of the Senate has something called franking dollars. There's a lot of rules and regulations around the use of franking dollars. It just so happens that the incumbent's been in trouble twice for using franking dollars during campaign seasons. And there's supposed to be a moratorium, sort of a blackout time period from, especially in a primary election when franking dollars aren't supposed to be used. But there's a 95% reelection rate or 95% renomination rate for incumbents. And there's a reason why. Because the modern political system and the modern two-party system in the United States, which, don't get me wrong, the two-party system is far more effective than sort of any other governmental system when it comes to how many parties there are. If we look at, the EU, especially if we look at Great Britain, they have a multi-party system, constantly having to build coalition governments. It's very hard for them to get anything done. It's a big challenge to get stuff through the works. But the problem is that the modern two-party system in the United States has become a modern monarchy. And it's no longer, at least in my experience, about what's in the best interest of the American people. It's about what's in the best interest of the party. And so the competition of politics is not about the competition of an idea or a challenge of the idea or the merit of the message. It's who can raise the most money to feed the political machine. And that's what it's come down to. So you're not wrong. We have an uphill battle. It's been an uphill battle since we announced.
He's raised over $500,000. He's spent $250,000 on this campaign so far. Your number has one less zero.
Yeah, we've raised. I think when we do the final reports, we'll be at close to 70,000, and we will have spent every penny of it by the time we're done.
Okay, what's been the biggest challenge in this race?
The biggest challenge is being able to effectively utilize the dollars and get out to see everybody and shake hands. We put, 12 or 15,000 miles on the truck since September 20th when we announced. We've been everywhere.
It's a big territory.
It's a big area.
It takes a while to get from one side to the other.
It does, yeah. And we've been to as many events as possible, and we've been to as many events outside the GOP as possible. GOP represents only about 4 to 5% of the overall vote. It's an important piece because they're the ones that are going to probably be more active in volunteering and that sort of thing. But independents, believe it or not, unaffiliated voters are the ones that make up a majority of registered voters in Western North Carolina.
And in North Carolina, a registered independent voter can vote in the Republican primary, correct?
That's correct.
And that's an important distinction because I know we live in Colorado. You had to be an R or a D to vote in the primary.
They call it a semi-open primary. So if it's a closed primary, you have to be registered for one party or the other. In North Carolina, it's a semi-open primary. And if you're an unaffiliated voter, you can, in the primary, you can pull a Republican ballot and vote, or you can pull a Democrat ballot and vote, but you can't do both. So you have to pick which you're going to vote. Are you going to vote on the Democrat ballot? Or are you going to vote on the Republican ballot? And you get to pull one. That doesn't mean that you're stuck in that voting process when it comes to the general election, which is one of the games that's being played. So we're watching openly Democrat candidates register as Republicans to run as Republicans. We're also watching Democrat unaffiliated voters pull Republican ballots and vote for a candidate they believe will be less capable of winning against their Democrat opponents in the general election.
Interesting.
Which is completely insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you like being the underdog?
It's the story of my life. I've always been the underdog.
So you feel comfortable in this role?
Yeah. I mean, no, not comfortable. I'm exhausted. Confident in our ability. Yeah. Look, we've talked to a lot of people. We've talked to a lot of people. We've taken the time to shake hands. We've done the thing that the incumbent hasn't done, and then we've shown up and listened. And we also challenged thought processes. Like, this is a good example. We were at an event, a meet and greet, and we were talking about, God, what do you guys want to see? Well, we want to see less government. I agree. I want to see less government. We want to see less taxes. I agree. We want to see deregulation. I agree. I want to see deregulation too. What are you going to do to fix this if you win? Wait, hold on. Time out. We just went through less government, less taxes, and deregulation. But now you're asking someone who's running for a federal office what they're going to do to fix this problem if we win. Well, yeah. Well, do you have a solution? Well, no. Then I don't know how we're going to fix it. More importantly, what you just asked me, and it sounds like the particular problem that you just referenced is an issue that should be handled by states and the lowest level government as possible, not the federal government. So what am I going to do? I'm going to have a conversation with county representatives and general assemblymen and say, hey, there's this problem. It's been brought to my attention. Here's some solutions that have been presented. What are you guys going to do about this? Because it shouldn't be up to the federal government to do it. There's a disconnect and a level of, I would say, maybe apathetic voter response with so many people that I've met. They're so disenfranchised by what they see in modern politics. They're so frustrated by it,
Yeah, people are, they're untrusting of anybody that says they're going to represent them.
They should be.
Even if the person representing them has the best intentions.
Well, they should be. They should be untrusting because we've not in general, politicians have not given any reason to be trustworthy. Politicians. Career politicians, which was never the intention. Why is it that we have so many politicians that have signed, they agree and would endorse term limits, but nobody takes actions on it? Why is it that when the government shuts down, Congress and Senate keeps getting paid, but the military doesn't? How does that make any sense? When the budget's already been appropriated for the military for the next fiscal year, but we're going to do a governmental shutdown and say, oh, well, the longest one we just watched. Oh, well, the military's not going to get paid, but Congress is. And then Congress is acting like congressional members are like, well, I'm not going to take a paycheck. I'm going to stand in solidarity with our military. No, jackass, you should have voted that the military continues to get paid in the government shutdown, and you don't. Mm-hmm. You don't get to stand on some higher moral authority and act like you've done something that's gracious and out of the kindness of your heart because of an ethics background. Absolutely not. You want to prove that you believe in that? Put it in legislation. Change the standing House rules. How about we change the speech and debate clause? How about we force it so that congressmen have to speak facts rather than just slander and defamation? That'd be interesting. How about we pass a bill or a law and legislation that says that you're no longer allowed to do insider trading? How about we do that? Do you think that would be a benefit? How about we set definitive term limits, 3 terms or 4 terms for congressmen, 2 terms for Senate? How about we do that? Benjamin Franklin said that once the people realize they can vote themselves more money, we've lost the republic. When did that happen? Decades ago. And what's been the trajectory? Self-serving sycophants in positions of significance in order for them to find more power and influence. And the American people constantly paying the repercussions.
Have you thought about how you're going to bring this fire and conviction to office? Are you going to be able to prevent yourself from not burning up with anger, with
frustration?
Because I'm sure you're going to go to Washington and you're going to see this around you every day.
I was told that it's pretty spectacular or pretty amazing when a freshman has the ability to get even one thing done. So if they can get multiple things done, that's a blessing, maybe. My opinion is this: we have a mission, and I think that the American people, and especially the people of Western North Carolina, deserve somebody that's going to be as transparent with them as Tim Burchett is with the people in Tennessee. And I think that the people in Western North Carolina are tired of politics as normal. They're tired of politics as usual. They're tired of politicians as usual. And I think that they would much prefer an individual who's willing to just, hey guys, this is what's been put out to vote on. There's a 1,600-page omnibus bill. We've got a couple of options. We haven't had time to read through all the information in it. And I think that we should probably start passing clean bills that aren't just continuing resolutions without budgetary constraints so that we continue to print money like it's going out of style and not sort of reel in the waste, fraud, and abuse to the tune of almost $1.5 trillion a year. I think we need to make a change here, guys. So this is what's in the bill. I'm not going to vote yes on this. I'm going to vote no, and I'm going to shut down the government. You're going to support this or not? You tell me. I mean, the Continental Congress would go back to their people they represented and had conversations with them, and they would hold referendums and local votes to have conversations in order for them to take the message back up to the National Assembly again.
How do you plan on getting a pulse of your constituents when you're in office?
Showing up. Yeah, we had a government shutdown. The incumbent came back to Western North Carolina, and I never saw any town halls. I never saw an engagement with the local populace. I saw phone town halls, but I didn't see active interaction. And the word that I've gotten right now at this point is that people have seen more communication on text messages, emails, and mailers, as well as him more physically present in the last 8 weeks than they've seen in the last 2 full terms. Wonder why that is. It's election time, and he's running against an opponent that's not a fringe candidate. We have a real chance of winning. Yeah, we have a real chance of winning against an incumbent during an off year.
Are you feeling pretty good?
I'm feeling pretty confident with where we are right now. Yeah, I would say that if we're able to pull this off, then we have proven we have proven a multitude of things. One of the very first things that we've proven is that the Americans are done with standard. They're done with mediocrity. They're done with politics as usual. That's the first thing. I think it's going to prove that the people of Western North Carolina hold true to those Appalachian rugged individualism mentality. I think that's going to be true too. Yeah. And if we lose, well, it'll prove some other things. It'll prove that the political machine and the system that's been developed by politicians to maintain power is still effective, and it's still doing its job to maintain their position of power. But I can say this. The leading front runner for the Democrat Party right now in the region, Jamie Yeager, he's leading the polls against Chuck. Every poll that I've seen, not just internal party polls. And he's leading in the polls against Chuck. Chuck's got a major uphill battle if he beats us in the primary.
And that'll be independents that will decide the balance of that.
Yes, it will be.
What is something that people might not know about you from your campaign website?
I was a band nerd.
Really?
Yeah, I started playing the tuba when I was in 6th grade. So
you don't look like a band nerd.
I know. Yeah, I know. I get it. Yeah, I played the tuba in 6th grade is when I started playing. I learned which is kind of crazy. I learned how to play the tuba on trombone music or baritone music, which is still in the treble clef, not the bass clef. So I had to relearn all of my musical literacy when I got to high school out of middle school. I played football in middle school. So I played football and played in the band. High school, I played football, was in the marching band, and was in junior ROTC. So I was mostly nerd in high school, I think another thing too is people think of me as being very gruff, and I can get it. I understand why. I can be intimidating. I'm 6'3", 295 pounds. I'm a big guy. But I don't really listen to music much anymore, and when I do, it's mostly Mozart, believe it or not. The way composers were able to bring instruments together in such a organized yet sometimes chaotic manner, but still create something amazing, I thought was pretty interesting. Yeah.
And the hallmark of a great civilization is the music, the stuff that you don't have to do to exist as a civilization, but you do beautifully. Yeah. And the complexity of that music, and then you put it up against the music of today. I know I'm going to sound like an old guy, get off my lawn, but
well, back in my day, I remember I'd walk uphill both directions to school.
But then again, I wasn't alive in the Baroque period either.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that.
Yeah, I also really love. I am a history fanatic. Yeah. I love history. I love American history. I love world history. I love the study of ancient cultures and the rise and fall of civilizations. I love being able to look at historical references to gain context to modern problems that we face. There's this idea that, we're facing this problem for the very first time, and oh my gosh, and what are we going to do? And this is such a unique, and oh my God, guys, it's that's not true.
Everything's happening.
Yeah, I mean, look, we can talk about an exponential growth rate of technological advancements, but there was also a window of exponential growth rate of technological advances when we discovered the wheel, right? There was an exponential growth rate of technological advances when we were able to invent gunpowder. And so, yes, we're dealing with something at a different level with regards to AI technology and the development of technology that no longer contains a human soul. So sure, it's unique in that aspect, but every major technological advancement in history provides context to the current problems that we face as human beings on Earth. And so, like, one of my favorite historical points, you guys can hear the sirens in the background.
Adam, if you're elected, can you please divert emergency traffic around my office? They always come down Fifth Avenue.
I mean, it's, they can hit all the lights and get straight through, which is good. Have you ever done any research on the Mongolian Empire?
All I know is Genghis Khan.
The Mongolian Empire was the largest empire in the history of the world. Nobody knows. Most people don't realize
they got
that.
to the gates of Vienna.
So I mean, there was active. We know of a multitude of different skirmishes that took place, but the Mongolian Empire was the largest land-controlled empire in the history of the world. They conquered everything from China all the way to modern day Georgia, and where modern day Georgia is. And had interactions with some of the biggest world powers at the time, but they were the ones that controlled a majority of Earth's known territory at one point.
If I'm not mistaken, some of the roots of Finnish and Hungarian languages are rooted in the Mongols.
I think you're right. I mean, the world history connected to Genghis Khan and his offspring is insane. I mean, and I guess here's other thing. Here's an interesting thing. Like, most people don't realize that there was an entire Egyptian dynasty that was all based on Greek rulers after Alexander the Great. The entire Ptolemy Empire. So the Ptolemy dynasty was all based on Greek dynasties. Yeah, it's very, very cool. And if you ever get a chance to go to Tunis, Tunisia, so Tunis, which is believe it or not, Tunis is the modern city built on the ancient capital of the Carthaginian Empire. It was the ancient city of Carthage, and one of the most conquered cities in the world. But it's really cool. You can go and look at the ruins, and you can see Carthaginian ruins, you can see Roman ruins, you can see Persian ruins, you can see the Ottoman Empire's ruins. Like, you can see all the layers of ruins of conquerors that came through the region, which is phenomenal. And the second largest still standing Roman Colosseum in the world is called El Jim. It's located in Tunisia. And you can stand on a stair on the opposite side of the building and talk. And people on the other side of the building can hear you talk from that stair.
Wow.
The acoustics were so amazing on these things. So I'm a history nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a history nerd.
I like history. I love watching documentaries. Fortunately, my wife does as well. We watch a lot of documentaries.
Yeah. When I went to Bosnia, I read this book, and I think it was called The Key to My Neighbor's House. And there's a story in the book about, for most people don't even know the history of Bosnia and why the United Nations, America got into it. But during the breakup of Yugoslavia, there was a major conflict between Serbia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and there was a huge amount of genocide taking place, right? And so there's this town called Srebrenica. And Srebrenica was an enclave. It was a UN enclave, and there was a whole bunch of people that went there. And the Serbs basically just said, "No, we're good." And they went into Srebrenica and they just massacred everybody. But right outside of where we were, which was I think it was called Forward Operating Base Connor, in between Bratunac and Srebrenica. And when you came out of the FOB and you came down a road, you came up to an old, what looked to be bombed out building, right? It had been repaired and had, patches and stuff on there. Well, the story that I read talked about a story where there was a bunch of people that were brought in. They were packed into the sheep shearing factory, this building. And the Serbs opened up on them and massacred everybody in the building. And then when they were done, they said, "Hey, if you're still alive, stand up. We'll give you medical treatment." And obviously they stood up and they killed them too. But there was one person who didn't stand up and he stayed hidden. And then he crawled out of the back of the building. It was night, crawled out of the back of the building. And while all the gunmen had moved to the front of the building, they brought a front loader in, knocked out the front wall and used a front loader to scoop up all the bodies and dump it into a dump truck. This guy low crawled something like 1,000, like a kilometer, low crawled like 1,000 meters through a major field that was also a minefield to get away from this massacre site.
Jeez.
That building was the building that I saw every day I left the FOB. It was at that intersection.
Wow. And
seeing the building and asking some of the locals what happened at that building, and then going back and rereading the book to find those reference points, I realized what the building was. So on top of that, which was even crazier, if you leave that area and you go through a little town called Zvornik. Zvornik is a border town between Serbia and Bosnia. And there's this old, like, ruinous wall that runs down the side of the mountain, right? It's the kind of ridgeline. Well, when you go up to the top of it, come to find out, it's an old Roman outpost that was then used by, I think, the Persians and the Ottomans, or one vice versa. But it became an outpost for all of them because it was a great location. The pass was a strategic location where right along the Drina River, Zvornik, and there's a dam that's there, and it was a strategic location. So here we are in Bosnia, and every day I leave the compound, I see the building where a massacre took place maybe a little under a decade before we were there. And then we drive to go back to Eagle Base in Tuzla, and there's ancient Roman ruins. That's right there. Yeah. And it kind of brings to mind this idea of what we're facing now, which is this idea of like, there's an idea where people want to see a utopian community, but the human condition doesn't permit it. You know, there are some that are willing to live in peace. There are some that that want to take advantage of every other person they meet. The human condition does not permit a utopian life.
Crabs in the bucket, pulling other crabs down.
Exactly. And there's thousands and thousands of years of human history that demonstrate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to realize too that, you know, people will always say nowadays, you know, we're teetering on the edge of civil war, but we've always been kind of cantankerous and haven't gotten along very well between the political parties in this country. Yeah,
I mean, even early on, if you look at the division of political ideology between the Tories and the Whigs, you know, and then the formation of the Republican Party and the Democrat Party, and I mean, that's what led to the first Civil War. Mm-hmm. But I think in a lot of ways, the United States is very much kind of like the Greek nation states during ancient history. Athens and Sparta were at each other's throats all the time. And then the outside threat showed up and they all came together to go fight the outside threat. And when the outside threat went away, they were like, we have nothing to fight about. Let's fight each other again. Yeah. You know?
Do you think the American civilization is in decline, or?
I think so. I think Western civilization has been in decline for probably the last 50, 60 years. When a country or a civilization chooses to open its borders freely and permit the free range of human beings between nation states, you've lost national sovereignty and you've lost national security. And that is an indicator that, you know, it's no longer important to the people in charge for one reason or the other. But that would definitively represent a decline of the United States. Yeah.
Well, help us get back on track.
You know, my daughter's 5. Where's the country going to be in 15 years when she's 20, or in 10 years when she's 15? And I think any of us as parents look at this and go, what can we do to make our children ready for the world? And what can we do to make the world ready for our children? And I think that hiding our heads in the sand and just wanting to be left alone doesn't cut it anymore. We can't just abdicate our position. I know you want to go to church, you want to go to work, you want to go home, you want to raise your family, you want to have fun, you want to be able to pay your bills. However, I don't think people realize that if they're not civically engaged, they're not speaking up, they're not holding their representatives to account, and they're not voting on very important things like primaries, general elections, referendums that come about, they're not calling their representatives and applying pressure, then things like toll roads go up and never come down. Yeah. Things like property taxes in North Carolina, depreciating assets like your vehicle, never goes away. Things like, here's a question, you own your primary residence? Yeah. Well, are you assessed property taxes on your primary residence every year? Yes. If you don't pay your property taxes, is it your property? Because the government can threaten you with the use of force in order to physically remove you from your property and then seize it from you. That's extortion. And that's what we've gotten to in the United States. And the American people, because it's done piecemeal, right? It's done little by little. What is the story about, putting the frog into the boiling pot of water? Little by little, you increase the temperature. Mm-hmm. Just put a frog in a pot of water and put the water on the stove, and you increase the temperature so very slightly over a period of time. And before you know it, the water is boiling, but the frog is used to the boiling water and it refuses to get out and it dies. Right? Well, it's happening to the American people. We're the frogs in the boiling pot of water.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
I appreciate it.
And I truly admire your conviction. You've got a large task ahead of you, but I think that you've got the right attitude, and it seems like you have all of our best interests in mind.
I hope that we win, and even if we don't, this isn't done. mission is bigger than owning a seat or having a seat and pushing a button. The mission's far bigger than that. There's a mission to reinvigorate and revitalize constitutional conservative movement in the United States. Hopefully we get to be a small part of that.
Well, thank you, Adam.
Appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you.
The Kudzu Project is made possible by the Lucy Agency, helping businesses across the South grow deep roots and stand out. Based in Hendersonville, North Carolina, this full-service marketing firm builds handcrafted websites, eye-catching logos, and social media that pops for businesses and organizations. Because if your story's worth telling, it's worth telling right. Learn more at lucyagency.com. That's LUCEY agency.com.
Everyone has a story. And at the Kudzu Project, we want to hear yours. Go to kudzuproject.com and fill out our story submission form. You can write your story for us to read on the podcast, request to be interviewed, or even nominate someone else whose story deserves to be told. The Kudzu Project is all about capturing the voices and spirit of our community, and your story could be the next one we share. Visit kudzuproject.com and tell your story today.